Hey, I'm FLO CHASE. I'm an indie pop singer-songwriter, and I'm on the Nebula Music Podcast.
All right, what is up, everybody? Eddie Barco here once again, and welcome to the Nebula Music Podcast. If this is your first time joining us, this is a show where we talk to some of the coolest, most inspiring musicians of the music industry, whether they're notable, whether they've been around for a while, or whether they're up and coming and doing something unique and special. We have them on the show to pick their brain just for a little bit, and then hopefully we can learn something new from them. Today, I'm very excited because I have somebody who's incredibly talented, who's multifaceted too. It's not just in music. This individual does quite a bit of stuff and he does it very well. So I'm very excited to get an opportunity just to pick their brain for a little bit, because I have a feeling it will inspire you, a lot of you, to get up and just do some really cool stuff. I have my man, Mr. FLO CHASE, joining us today for a very cool conversation. How you doing, man?
Yeah, good. Thanks so much for that perfect introduction.
Hopefully it's up to your standards. I'll try my best to, build you up. I love it. And, I tell this to a lot of the guests just because I try to be as transparent as possible. But the truth is, there's a lot of people that want to come on the show, but I try my best to only get people that are doing something cool or something unique that brings a new perspective. So if I introduce you that way, it's because it's true. So I love it. I know you're currently near Australia. I've heard a lot of what's going on in the world. This year, maybe a year and a half, has been a bizarre year for everyone when it comes to music. So I've been doing my part just by asking all the artists that have come through just how they've been handling quarantine. I know we're kind of hopefully coming to an end very soon, but music has been very hard for a lot of people. So some people have been very creative, some people have not. Some people had to stop their tours, like a whole bunch of stuff happened. So I'm just curious, maybe you can give me a quick little rundown of how it's been for you. Has it been okay? Have you gotten a lot of work done? Maybe not. I don't know, but just walk me through, how's quarantine been for you?
It's been wild, to be honest. I've been all around the place. It started back last year. I went to French Polynesia. I was there for about 6 months. And obviously we were quarantined. It was a little better over there. We were only quarantined for about a month. And then things opened up again. So I was able to play a few acoustic shows. Obviously the bigger venues were closed, but all the smaller venues were open. So that was nice. And I was also pretty busy finishing off my album. Thankfully, I was done with all the recording. So it's a lot of mixing and getting all the release ready. Then I flew back to LA. I was there for about 3 months. And I was able to shoot music videos. That's why I went back to LA, because obviously everything was still closed, but at least I could get my content done. And now I've been in New Caledonia, where my family is, for about 4 months. So I flew out here. It was COVID-free at first, so I had to quarantine a hotel for 14 days. Oof. And I've been here for 3 months, and we got the first case of COVID about a month and a half ago.
No way.
They were COVID-free for about a year. And thankfully, we're back to COVID-free, apparently. So things are opening up again. So it's been wild. I've actually been traveling, even though traveling is pretty tough at the moment. But yeah.
Yeah, where have you gone? Or where are you allowed to go right now? Because I have no idea. I haven't traveled at all.
Yeah, well, I guess it depends. It changes all the time. So when I was in Tahiti, at first I couldn't fly back to the US. They closed the borders. But then I was able to fly back to the US. And then I went back to Tahiti, to French Polynesia, to get to New Caledonia. So you just have to figure out on the go, what's open, what's closing. Yeah, it changes all the time.
Yeah. Where is that, by the way? Because you did say that first you went to French Polynesia, right? I'm not very good with geometry. With geology. Where is that at?
It's about a 10-hour flight from LA. So not even, it's about an 8-hour flight. And then it's another 5 hours to New Caledonia. So,
gotcha. I love that you used this time to travel and get a lot of your stuff done. You were in LA when it was still shut down. I think in the US, everything is getting fairly okay. I mean, I already have my first vaccine shot and I'm going to get the second one. But it is interesting because I bring a lot of this stuff up because in my experience talking to people throughout this whole entire year, there's been a lot of exciting things that happened during quarantine, a lot of unexpected things that happened, and some people mentally, it's been a struggle. I mean, even for me, being cooped up in a place, after a while, it gets a little, I don't know, you get cooped up, right? But you traveled a lot, so which is good. For you specifically, when things started to shut down, did you have a plan in place already? Did you have something that you were going to do and then that got canceled immediately and then you had to sort of restructure, or was it nothing like that?
Yeah, it was. I was just about to release my album. So we were planning on hopefully going on a tour. So we were starting to book dates and stuff. But obviously everything got shut down so quick too. I remember it just happening all of a sudden. So then I had to, reschedule as well. And my family is away. So it was pretty scary at first, actually. We didn't know what that COVID was. So
Yeah.
everything changed from having to release my album to, okay, I have to find a way to get home to spend some time with my family. So yeah, tours got cancelled, and then I was obviously out of work in LA, apart from studio work. So that's why I went and traveled back home, visited my family. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's actually an interesting segue because you do a lot of different things, which is pretty cool that you are incredibly multifaceted with the things that you do. You were currently in LA, or maybe you weren't, but I know that you work a lot in LA. Do you only do music here, or do you do other things? Like, I know you're into modeling. I know you do other things too. Was that the work that you were doing while you were also here, music and modeling, that sort of thing?
Since I moved out to LA, I've been in LA for 3 years now. It's mostly been music. I used to model back when I was in Australia a lot more, and I'm still doing a little bit of it when opportunities come across. But I'm definitely focusing on music since I made the move. Yeah.
Yeah. So here's an interesting thing because the show's about music, you normally have a lot of musicians here, and luckily every musician or every person involved in music has a very colorful history and many different backgrounds. So you get a chance to explore that. I did manage to have a very talented artist not that long ago, Kira. So shout out to you, Kira, who was also a model and songwriter as well. Now, what's interesting is I've never got the opportunity to explore that world, so she kind of gave me a little rundown of how it worked. But what's fascinating is you could teach me because I don't know anything about it, but from what I gathered, most people that do modeling, it's a very temporary thing, and then eventually they all move on to something else. I think it's very rare when someone becomes like that legendary model that's been there for a long time, you know? So for you specifically, it seems like you transitioned from that to doing more music stuff. Does that ring true for you? Like, do you feel like modeling was just like a stepping stone and you always knew you were going to do something else? Or was it just something that you were doing at the time, you enjoyed it, and then you just decided, music's more for me? I don't know. I'm wondering.
It's a part-time thing for me, actually. I was always doing music. And I guess my parents put me into modeling when I was younger. But it was just, that was my side job, side gig, instead of having to work at a cafe or something. And that was same thing with music, even though I do enjoy modeling, but it was more of a way for me to pay for my albums, pay for studio time. So music has always been the focus. And then modeling was just the side gig to get a little bit of extra income, especially when you started out as an independent artist. So it's never really been a goal to become a full-time model. And like you said, it's really, really hard. And if I did want to do that, then obviously I don't think I'd be able to do music and modeling. I'd have to focus purely on one thing.
Yeah.
So it's always been a side thing for me. Yeah.
Music. Can I ask you, in your experience, did anybody, I don't know how to phrase it, but I'm wondering, did you feel like, I guess let me phrase it this way. Was it obvious for everyone around you that modeling was just like a side thing? And the reason why I ask is, in my experience, when it comes to entertainment in general, whether it's acting, film, music, modeling, whatever it is, you get a large number of people who that's their passion, right? So they're going for it, all eggs in that basket, and they're going for it. Just kind of like with you in music, right? But sometimes I do encounter moments where there is this sort of, I'm not saying it happened to you, but I'm wondering that there is this sort of animosity towards people who are kind of like doing multiple things, you know? And so I'm wondering for you, did you ever experience that? Was that not your experience at all? I mean, if it wasn't, that's great. But I'm wondering if you ever felt a little weird. Maybe some people were like, oh, you're not doing this full time. Well, that's weird. You shouldn't belong here. I don't know. I'm curious how that works.
Well, that's the funny thing with modeling, actually, because every time I turn up to a casting or something, you'd speak between models and the first question would be, so what do you do? So it's like, I would say 90% models are not just models. Every time you turn up somewhere, they're like, so what's your actual full-time thing? Just because it's hard to live just doing modeling. So I guess most people, in that industry, unless they already know about you and that you're really doing well in the modeling industry, they sort of know that you're doing something else anyway. So never really felt like, I don't know, every job I did and even every people I met, music was always what I would say, yeah, I'm actually a a full-time musician and I had to do this on the side. So, but sometimes maybe on social media too. I used to post a lot more modeling photos back in the days just to get more work. So some people would have trouble to differentiate between music and modeling. What is it that he does? So obviously then I decided to focus on posting more music content and put even modeling more on the side. So
interesting. Did you ever feel like this has always been a topic that I've wanted to explore, and we don't have to explore it at all. But I'm curious what you think about this, because I keep my ear low to the ground. You know, I call myself a professional observer. That's really what I do. And I'm just generally curious. I'm always trying to learn different things. One thing. And I always appreciate when someone like you is willing to open up, because it's a two-way street. It's one thing to ask questions, but if no one's willing to answer, then what's the point, you know? But it's kind of a touchy territory, right? But one thing I would hear when I was growing up, not so much anymore, but when I was growing up, there was this sort of animosity towards people that were, like I mentioned earlier, in different industries, but more specifically people who were more on the fashion side of things, who were more into like modeling, and people who were just like really, really good looking professionally. And it takes a lot of work, and it's like a job to be really, really good looking and fit for that job. Right. And it's something that it's very impressive, and this is something I picked up on. I noticed how there was a lot of guys specifically. I think guys do this more than women do. I mean, I can only speak from my experience as a guy and hearing this through, you know, the grapevine. But there was a lot of guys who were very like judgmental towards other guys who, like you, were models and were very good looking, and then used, I wouldn't even say used, but had momentum, because they would also do music and other things as well. Sometimes it wasn't even music. Sometimes it would be acting. Sometimes it would be something else, right? So there was this sort of like, oh, you have an advantage because you're really good looking. Now that's not true, because I know how hard it is to like maintain yourself physically fit. But I'm wondering for you, did that ever cross your mind? Was there ever like this fear that I want to do music, but maybe I will be judged because I'm also a model or something? I don't know, but I do find that it can be hard to transition in any industry, especially when you have a pool on one side and then you want to go to the other side. There's always going to be this like, oh, you're only doing that because you have some pool. Anyways, my point is, you're a very good looking dude. I'm wondering, did you ever feel like that was a problem and you had to like overcome that to some extent, or maybe not? I don't know.
I guess we all have self-doubts. So obviously at first, I was obviously even more towards the guy audience. I obviously thought I'd get judged more for my looks than my music. But then there's always two sides, and I always think it's always better to focus on the brighter side. And I also looked at it as an advantage. So I was like, obviously, being good looking doesn't mean you're going to make it as a musician, because music is what matters the most. But as I took it as an advantage, I'm like, well, maybe I should use my looks as well to sort of help me in the music industry. So I think I tend to looked at it more as a positive thing than a negative. Yeah, but I did feel obviously younger too when I was 17 and I really got into music 18, and modeling was more present. Obviously, I was feeling judged, especially by my peers and my friends. Is he really a musician, or is he a good-looking dude who's trying to become a pop star, sort of thing, you know? But then as you grow older, and obviously I was way more into music than looking at comments and stuff. But you grow about it, you grow with it, and
It does seem like you're very natural with it, though. Like, it seems like you are somebody who likes to roll with the punches, and when you want to do something, you kind of just go for it. You would be surprised how many artists I've had the pleasure of talking to and meeting and stuff. It's a very common thing amongst creatives, because our job is to put ourselves out there, whether it's modeling or acting or film or whatever. You're putting something out there from you. Can be very, very intimidating. And sometimes that's not something that's easily learned. You know what I mean? Like, it's not easily learned how to look at the positives, like you were saying, which is brilliant, by the way. The fact that you were able to see your advantages and say, hey, well, I've been given this tool set, I'm going to use it. You'd be surprised how hard it is for a lot of people to like move past that. Some people get stuck in that mindset for so long. And they get out of it way late. I mean, it's never too late, but anyways, my point is, where do you feel like that ability to move on came from? Because what was that?
I think definitely my mind straight away goes to like my peers and my family. I guess obviously the people you surround yourself with help you bring confidence to what you do as well. So, and that's even more music than looks. Obviously, releasing my first EP, or I used to do covers on YouTube back when I was younger, and that was pretty scary at first. Yeah, but I think the people surrounding me, and obviously, I guess bringing confidence, and so I think that's definitely where it came from. Yeah.
Yeah, good for you. I'm glad that you have that you had a supportive system that allowed you to expand that and really just dive into what you wanted to do. So kind of transitioning to that a little bit, how did you, I know you mentioned that you were starting to get interested in music and you wanted to put out your EP, you were doing covers on YouTube and stuff. When did you feel like you wanted that to be your reality? Just because I know that sometimes just putting music out there as a hobby, it can take people some time to be able to build it up as a career. But you went for it pretty quickly. You know, you knew that you wanted to do it and you didn't really like stop. So I'm wondering, what was the deciding factor that made you want to transition from other things to doing music?
It's funny. It all came pretty quick, like you said, because I've always been into music growing up, but I never had the ambition to become a musician. So I was actually studying a Bachelor of Science. I wanted to become a vet at the time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Smart
and then
dude. I like it.
yeah, maybe that's why I went to music. I wasn't smart enough. So I was lazy. Anyway, but it came pretty late. I was 2 years through my degree, and at the time I was doing more and more songwriting, releasing more videos. And I think it was then I decided to move out to Sydney. I was living in a small town called Noosa at the time in Australia. I was like, well, as much as I enjoy science, I really do, but I don't know, something about music is calling me. So I'm going to move to Sydney. I'm going to get a degree in music. So I have something, even though a degree in music doesn't necessarily mean much, but I went and studied music performance. And I think about halfway through my degree, I was like, okay, I really, really love music. And there's obviously more than one field to music that we've learned through the degree. And I was like, that's what I want to do. And if I do want to go back to science later on, sure. But ever since I made the decision, music has been the first thing on my mind. Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I love that you come from a science background. That is something that I massively respect just because, I don't know. For me, science has always been a little bit difficult. I like physics, but everything else is a little hard. I'm wondering why were you attracted to being a vet? That is something that's I mean, I think a lot of people love animals, but very few actually actively try to be a vet. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't know. I was also trying to figure out what I wanted to do after school, to be honest. And I've always loved animals since I was young. And biology was sort of my favorite subject at school, obviously after sport. But yeah, I was like, right now this feels right. So, and still today, I still think I would be really happy living a life as a vet. I would still be very fulfilled. So yeah, I don't know. It's always been there, and that's sort of where my heart went at the time. And then music took over, and my heart was like, it's beating harder for music than it is for becoming a vet. And if you want to go back and help animals later on, you can always do it. So
yeah, I'm wondering, because this is just something that kind of came up to me, but there is this sort of mentality, and I'm wondering what you think about this. There's a lot of people who have two equal loves, right? And so I'm not saying this is your case, but just from what I've learned, there is this sort of common knowledge that in order to do music, let's just use music as an example, but I think it's the same across the board for almost all creative arts. Being young tends to be the key a lot of the times. You know, you do have experiences where there are older people who manage to break through and make a career. You see it all the time in acting, right? And in music too. But I do find that is a common experience where there are people who have two loves, like you, for example, music and science, right? And they end up choosing music, which I'm happy for. But a lot of the times that the choice revolves around like, okay, well, I got to try to do music first. And then if that doesn't work, I guess I'll do the science thing later. Now, I think I know the answer why, but I'm curious in your opinion, why do you think on average most artists do this? And I'm glad they do. Let me just make that clear. Like, I'm glad that we all decide to do it. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that. But I wonder, like, why do we feel like we need to make this choice when we're young and versus the other way around? You know what I mean? Whether versus getting the degree and then being like, maybe when I'm 40, I'll try pursuing music. You know what I mean? Like, such an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, it's true. It's funny. Yeah, it works. I don't know. I think there's many things. Well, firstly, I guess it doesn't take like, I guess for some people, but making into music industry is a long run. It's a marathon. So you obviously better do it young. Obviously, not only will I have more time, but I'll be more motivated for sure. And then you also think your chances are probably better when you're younger, I guess. That's where sort of where my mind went. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I mean, it is sort of the market for a lot of young people, but that makes sense. That seems like the obvious answer, and I'm glad that. I mean, it seems obvious, but I was just curious to see what you thought about that. So
there's a bit of fear involved too, I guess. A bit of fear. So you're like, I'll do it now, and then if I fail, I can go something later. I don't know. Yeah. There's probably a lot involved. Yeah, but there was definitely fear at first for me as well.
Yeah,
it was hard to change completely and drop out of what I was studying at the time.
Yeah.
But once again, that's life. You have to jump in and ride the boat, and then you'll figure it on the way, basically.
True. And I feel like sometimes that's the best way to be able to figure things out. You just kind of go with it. When you decided to start doing music, I imagine that you were doing it locally in Australia. And then a couple years later, that's when you decided to branch off and you came to LA and other things. Excuse me about that. How is the music scene in Australia? Obviously, this is pre-COVID, so this might not apply anymore. But when you started to really go for it, what was it like trying to start your career? You definitely went for the more acoustic route, and you make beautiful music. There's a lot of acoustic artists coming out from Australia, which is amazing. So I'm wondering, like, so I guess my question is two-parted. Is acoustic music like very, very popular in Australia? And number two, how does one go about starting your career in that market? Because it's very different from like the US or anywhere else.
Sure. I guess first question, there's a lot of like indie Australian folk is what I would call it, which I definitely got inspired by growing up when I moved out to Australia. Some of my favorite bands are still those indie folk bands from Australia. So it's definitely a big genre, but there's a lot of music in Australia. Even when I went to uni, I would say most people were into metal, which people don't expect. So there's a pretty big metal scene. So I guess you can still do all types of music in Australia. But in terms of the industry, even though I didn't have that much experience, I moved out when I was 23. It's definitely smaller than somewhere like the United States, where you move from one state to another, and it's a total different vibe in terms of music genres and industry. So it depends what you want to do, I guess. Yeah, I've always had the American dream since I was 12. I always told my brother, we'll go to LA, we'll go to America, and that's where we'll end up. So it's always been in the back of my mind.
Yeah, I love that.
It's very different, for sure.
It's incredibly different. You know, what's interesting is I feel like there's a lot of people from the U.S. who love Australia equally as much. I feel like there are certain places, and I'm not the authority in this. This is just what I've observed. So I could be wrong. So forgive me, everyone, if I'm wrong. But I've observed that as Americans, as someone who's from the U.S., there does seem to be like 4 or 5 places that everybody loves and wants to go to. In Australia, I would say it's definitely one of like the top 2 places. Americans love Australia. So it's fascinating because I also have had the pleasure of meeting so many artists from Australia who, like you, have had that drive from a long time ago that I gotta make it to the States. I think I know why, and I've talked to so many artists from other countries, but I'm wondering, in your opinion, is the reason why there's this desire to come to the United States to do music, is it because the market is so huge, because it's just so like bombastic when it comes to entertainment, or is there another reason why there's this like drive to make it to America at some point in your career?
I think that's definitely why. The market, and then probably as well the people we grew up listening to. A lot of music comes from America, so some of my favorite bands were, obviously you see them tracking their records in America, touring in America. So for sure, I would say that's a big part of it. But in my case, I've been traveling, like I'm from Australia, but I moved to Australia when I was 12. So I've sort of travel bug since I was young. So I'm sort of used to moving. But yeah, America was I guess even watching movies in Hollywood and stuff like that. Since a young age, you grow up and you see America is like, well, if you want to make it, that's where you got to go.
Yeah. What was your impression?
That's probably always true, but yeah.
It's true. You're absolutely right. It's not always true, but it does happen quite often. But I'm curious, what was your first impression? You left where you were currently living and you moved here to the United States. What was your impression?
At first, if I have to be totally honest, it took me a while to fall in love with LA, to be honest. At first, I was a little, I don't want to say disappointed, obviously. Yeah, because even I moved out here with my brother. We'd never been here before. So we flew out to the States, and even though we had no idea what it was, and we moved out there. So it was different, especially coming from an island, moving to Australia, which is already a pretty big city, and then moving to LA, which is much bigger. But it just felt a little overwhelming, I guess. I didn't expect the system to be so crazy, basically. Yeah. Australia, like we were living in Sydney, it's a pretty big city as well, but the lifestyle is very chilled still, very chilled in terms of traffic. If you want to go surfing in the morning and then record at night, moving out to LA, we figured out, okay, cool, we actually have to plan on where we're going to live, because otherwise we'll either spend the day in the car or,
Yeah, I always tell that to friends that, excuse me, I always tell that to friends who move out to LA, that you can't just do that. It's very, very hard to just get in your car and like, hey, I'm gonna visit my friend across town. You're gonna spend hours in the car. You have to plan all that stuff. But there are a lot of secret little gems in LA that I think that's where people start to fall in love with the city. As someone who I'm born and raised here, and everyone who listens to the show knows that. But the one thing that I do find that's common is when people move out here, there is this sort of impact of like, oh, this is not at all what I thought it would be like. It can be very polluting. There's a lot of people, a lot of homelessness. And so that initial shock can sometimes push people away. But if you look under the surface, there's a lot of cool stuff. For you, how long did it take for you to like kind of feel like you belonged or like you liked being part of LA?
I guess already after 6 months or a year, I was already starting to like it. But I guess 2 or 3 years, LA felt like that's the place that I love and I want to be. So 2 to 3 years. But then it's funny, even at first, once I missed Australia and Australia felt like home, every time I would fly back, a part of me was missing LA. So I had this weird love and hate relationship where I'm like, oh, I got to get out of here. And then a month later, I'm like, oh, far out, I got to get back there because I miss it. So like you said, it came with, it's a big city. So you obviously have to not only meet people, but find out about the cool hidden little jams and obviously find your way through it. Yeah. Because even though Sydney's big, but it's much faster to figure your way around Sydney.
Yeah. That's what I've heard. That's what I've heard. And LA you can get lost and it's very, very, it's just congested a lot of the times. But I'm wondering, as someone who moved here from a different country, what were some of the things that you did at first? Because there's a lot of people that listen to this show who are from the United States, but they live in other states. They live in places that you don't consider entertainment hubs. And a lot of them at some point decide to move either to LA or New York or Nashville or somewhere else. And I find that it helps to hear experiences from people when they like someone like you who moved from a different country, came to LA and made it work. I'm wondering for you, what were some of the things that you started doing that started helping your music career to actually start progressing? Because you're doing some pretty cool things and you do have some momentum, but that doesn't always happen to people. I would argue there's so many artists that come here. I would argue the odds are not always in your favor, but it does depend on what you do. So you clearly did some good things. I'm wondering what were some of those things, if you can remember.
Yeah, which is why, sorry, I'm going somewhere else, which is why I always telling my friends, like, most people tend to come for 3 months and then they expect things to move faster. And obviously it's a shock at first and they tend to leave a little bit early, in my opinion. So I think the main reason I fell in love as well with LA is obviously because I stick at it. At first, even music-wise, it was hard. It was messaging, trying to get gigs and stuff like that, and no one gets back to you, obviously, because there's so many people doing it. But a major thing is obviously I met the guy I work with now, his name is Fry. He basically became my best friend. And obviously, getting to the studio every night, tracking music, making music has made I would say probably one of the major reasons why I love LA, and it feels like home because creatively, I've never felt so great. I've never had the opportunity to be able to go to the studio every night and work on craft. So that's one big thing. And then another thing is content. It's everyone's doing it. So I love the fact that everyone's an artist, and that if you're looking for someone to shoot a music video or I don't know, a photo shoot, you work with incredible people, and most of them are even willing to collaborate. So everyone's got that, I guess, even though we're not all in the same boat, but it feels like you're in the same boat and everyone's sort of working together. And if you're looking for people like, to shoot things, it's so much easier than it was back in Australia.
Yeah. And you're right. I do feel like anywhere else, it doesn't even matter if it's the US or Australia or somewhere else. You do find that in the major metropolises where entertainment is a thing, that's where you find a lot of the really creative collaborators that are willing to do that. And LA is a good city for that. One description that someone gave once was LA is very entrepreneurial. Hopefully I said that correct. Entrepreneurial. I hate that word. Anyways, the point being is everyone here is trying to make it, right? So everyone's hustling. So everyone gets it. You know, when you rub shoulders with people, it's not strange to meet somebody who's just in the flow. They're trying to get their name out there, and so are you. So there's this like, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. Whereas there's other cities where I'm not sure how much you've traveled the U.S. or how much time you've spent in different cities, but there is a different vibe no matter where you go. L.A. is very much like you were saying, not everyone's on the same boat, but they will scratch your back. It's a lot harder to find loyalty in a city like LA. But how did you manage to stand out, though? That is the interesting question that a lot of people have. Because, yes, while there's so many artists here that are willing to collaborate, so many brilliant filmmakers, everyone is trying, there is saturation with tons and tons of people trying to do it. So standing out can sometimes seem obvious, but also not. You know, it's hard to do it. So someone like you has clearly figured it out. I'm wondering, do you know what that thing was?
Yeah, that's a tough question, actually. I'm not sure. I guess probably my background has something to do with it. The fact that every time I meet someone, they don't even know where I'm from because my accent is not totally Australian. So people are like, where the hell is this dude from? So I guess that probably brings interest as well. And then I don't know. It's a tough question.
So you're aware that people find you a little like intriguing.
For sure, yeah. Different. Even my brother and I, even though we're like in LA, and obviously it's the acting hub, and there's a lot of really good-looking people in LA. And at first we felt like, well, why are people really looking at us? But I guess it's because we look different as well. We look different to most people. So that's probably another advantage there, being in LA, not being from LA. You're different. That's sort of a way to stand out, which obviously can go good or bad, but so that's probably another reason we feel different. And even, I guess, a personality. I don't know. I feel like I'm talking myself up, but
well, you should be. Being different. You should be.
No, I don't know. I guess in Australia, people, in general anyway, which makes sense because the lifestyle is so much more laid back, but Australians tend to be a little more open and friendly, I feel, than people in LA in general. So maybe that played in my favor as well. The fact that I'm open, almost naive when I moved out here because I was figuring out the system, and the fact that you're like, wow, this guy's really open and he seems like he's honest about it. So maybe that also played a big part in obviously meeting people and making connections in LA. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you find that you're still open like that, or has that changed since you've lived in LA?
It's definitely changed, which I've always said I don't want it to change. It's definitely changed, but I think in a good way. I haven't changed in I don't think in any bad way. I just understand how to figure out, I guess, the system and people a little better now.
You know, it's funny. I don't know why, but your story reminded me. I had the pleasure of interviewing Johans from Avatar, which is a metal band from Sweden. I'm not sure if you know who they are, but he was telling me about his first experience in the United States, and I can't remember if it was him or his bandmate, but he was basically telling me how especially in Europe and other countries in Europe, it's not that people are standoffish, they're just a little bit more literal. So unless they know you, unless you become friends or your neighbors, no one asks you how you doing. Like it's just not a thing. Whereas in the United States, it's very common to be like, hey, how are you? I'm good. Bye. Kind of thing. So he tells me about this experience. I think they were in Arizona on their first US tour, and they go to a grocery store to buy stuff. And the checkout girl just asks the bandmate, like, hey, so how are you? And I think his grandma had just passed. So he just starts telling her this long 10, 15-minute story about how he feels sad that his grandma's away. And, Johannes was able to pick up how awkward that situation was. And they learned after that experience, like, oh, here, how are you does not mean how are you. It's just, it's a greeting. And we got to like say hello. So it's just so interesting because there is these different mannerisms that can separate you. But I like the fact that you are aware that in a way is an advantage because you are different. And that's how you can stand out.
I guess like anyone, obviously, like we said, the grass is always greener on the other side, and it's more interesting. So it's the same thing. When an American flies to Australia, I guess people love him and they're more interested. It's different.
Yeah, I love it. So I'm wondering, I want to know a little bit about like the music that you've got going on and that how you got inspired to make the music that you do, because I know that we mentioned very briefly that indie folk, acoustic, that style is very, very popular. And it's very well done. Like it's incredibly well done from all the artists that I've heard, including yours. Where does that inspiration come from? The whole folky side of things? Because, and again, I'm uneducated, so forgive me. But when I think of Australia, and again, this is what this is gonna show people like how little I know. But that's why I like to learn. When I think of Australia, I only think of I think of the beach, I think of Sydney, and then I think of the outback, right? But and nothing in between do I ever imagine like folk music. When I think of folk music, I think of like a farm, or like the mountains or something. But it's a very popular genre and it's very well done in Australia. So I don't know how you got into it, what inspired you to do it, but where does that thematic inspiration come from for you and many other Australians that are into that genre, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense. I think there's probably two facets to my story. Obviously, growing up on a French island, music was very different. Actually, New Caledonia is a lot about reggae here, so you hear a lot of reggae music. Yeah. But my parents were big folk fans, so I remember growing up listening to like records of the big folk bands back in the days, like Simon and Garfunkel and all those. So that's definitely played I'm sure, some sort of a musical inspiration in my life. I still listen to these records today. And then Australia as well. It's funny too, because that genre feels very mature for like some of these folk artists in Australia, like 18, and their music sounds like they're a lot older. Yeah. But once it probably goes with the culture of surfing and I guess the Australian culture. You wouldn't expect it, but like a surfer guy, you'd expect it. Well, he probably listens to R&B or something, but most of them are folk fans and they have their guitars with them on the beach. And so
interesting. It reminds me of, have you ever heard of an artist called Ziggy Alberts?
I think he's from Byron Bay, isn't he?
Yeah. He was just on the show. So Ziggy kind of tells me his experience too. It's exactly what you described. It's kind of hilarious. He's a surfer guy, just kind of got on his van and just traveled around Australia playing guitar while surfing. And it's interesting because we have a similar artist here in the U.S. who has, I think, a similar story. I could be wrong, but you ever heard of Jack Johnson? I think you might have.
For sure. Yeah.
I think he's from Hawaii, right? I think he's from Hawaii. If I'm not mistaken, he's from Hawaii. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. But he has that similar vibe where it's like that folky songwriter style that you would normally imagine comes from, like the deep country or just somewhere where there's like mountains and stuff, was birthed from the beach, from like just sitting by the waves. It's so, it's so fascinating that this carefree personality and attitude towards your music, Ziggy's music, Jack Johnson's music, all have that common, like, carefree beach vibe. It's so fascinating. I don't know where it comes from, but it clearly comes from the exact same place.
Yeah, it's funny, yeah. Even though I'm not a huge surfer dude, but I'm definitely a beach dude, but it's funny, yeah. I'm not sure where this started, especially because my experience is different too, because I'm Australian, but not I'm actually French, not Australian. So my story is a little different. But once again, moving to Australia, that's sort of what inspired me. So.
But you also grew up on an island, though, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. There's like this parallel. Like it's the commonality is like the ocean, which is so beautiful. It's such a beautiful theme to explore. But when you write your music, when you get inspired to write a song, where do you find your inspiration from? Like, what do you normally find yourself writing about then?
Mine's been a lot about, especially this latest album, Toi. It's been a lot about traveling. I've been traveling. Obviously, I was moved out to Sydney, then I moved out to LA. I left New Caledonia when I was 12. And I guess LA, even more than all of them, it's being away from my loved ones and my family. So a lot of my inspiration comes from being away from my loved ones. I guess a little bit of solitude, for sure. And then there's also, I guess, a more of a positive side where I'm thankful for these people. And even though they're not here with me, they're part of the ride. And they're sort of, I guess, my main motivation why I made the move to move out to LA and stuff like that. Yeah. So it's about distance, yeah.
How interesting, because I do find your music, when you listen to it, it's very oddly peaceful, which is strange because it makes sense that some of your inspiration is about distance. You know, it's about being maybe slightly lonely, but not entirely lonely because you have a support system, you have your family, but you're just not next to them.
Exactly.
And it's fascinating that the feeling of loneliness can inspire such peaceful music. It's strange, but it works. Do you know how that happens at all? Because sometimes, in my experience, I've talked to plenty of artists, some who are instrumentalists, mostly piano, who, when they write songs about loneliness or get inspired by loneliness, it's very melancholic. You know, it's very like spacious and very just like, oh, I can feel the loneliness, but not with you and not with other artists like you who are in the same genre. There's a very common theme of like inspirational, uplifting feelings, even though the inspiration comes from something like loneliness. It's strange.
It is strange, yeah. But I guess my genre probably, there's definitely a little more, I wouldn't say aggression, but compared to my first EP and my new album, that I'm sure came from distance. And obviously sometimes you feel frustrated about being away from all these people. But once again, in terms of uplifting, I guess it's because when I do write about distance and obviously those I love being away, they sort of bring comfort at the time of writing. So maybe that makes sense in a way. Like my mind, even though it goes about feeling alone and being away from them, but I guess thinking of them also brings peace and positivity in my mind. So that's sort of, I can make sense of it. But you're right. It's funny how it works. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a beautiful thing, man. I'm curious, when are you planning? I'm not sure if you are, but when are you planning on coming back to LA?
I'm hoping June. I'm actually renewing my visa at the moment. So as soon as I get my new visa, I'm hoping to fly back to LA, which should be around June or July. Yeah.
Beautiful. That's not too far away, man. And it looks like things will be actually opening up.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you'll be able to play shows and all those things. That's pretty cool, man. So, I mean, Flo, I just want to say thank you for taking time out of your day just to chat with me and talk about music, your life a little bit. Before I let you go, I want to find out more about, I know we talked about your music, but I want more details. Like, what do you have on your plate? I know you've been working on music. You said you had some music videos. Is there any new releases on the horizon, any performances, any tours coming up? I'd like to know.
Yeah. Well, firstly, thanks so much for having me, Eddie. Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Of course.
But I've just released a brand new album. It came out on March 12th. It was actually my first full-length album. I've released singles and EPs before. And there was 4 singles and 4 music videos that came with it. There's a new music video coming, I'm hoping by the end of this month, or if not, next month. And then we're doing a B-side of the album as well, where we get a featured vocalist to take on the songs as well. So people can look out for that one. So it's some collaborations. And then in terms of dates, I got nothing confirmed, but like you said, I'm hoping to be back in the States in June or July. And obviously things are reopened, and we're hoping to take the album on tour. So
beautiful, man. And I can't wait till you come back to LA. Hope you have some good shows, because I think your music is very pretty. It's a breath of fresh air from a lot of the, I mean, all music is really, really good, but I do find that like the indie folk stuff that you bring to the table is very nice break from a lot of the usual pop stuff that's around. And I don't know, I think it's really good, and I think you have a lot of good stuff waiting for you around the corner once things open up. So thank you, Flo, for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thanks to you. Thank you so much, Eddie.